Weeks of record temperatures outside and in the water. Just this week, a research buoy in Manatee Bay off South Florida's east coast registered the water temperature at 101.1 degrees. Why should you care? Well, ocean warming can affect marine life and ecosystems. Brian Dzwonkowski, an associate professor at the University of South Alabama and researcher with the Dauphin Island Sea Lab, is here to explain. Thank you so much for being here. To put that 101.1 temperature in perspective, what is a normal water temperature? Well,
normal water temperature is going to vary depending on where you are. In our area, water temperatures in the mid-80s are going to be typically what we'll see offshore of Dauphin Island and offshore of Orange Beach. And so Manatee Bay is a significant distance away, but by most measures, that's a really hot temperature for the ocean in the coastal environment.
Yeah, I read could break records. They haven't exactly decided that yet, but they're working on it. Compare ocean temperatures this year to previous years.
Yeah, so right now, the global oceans are experiencing an extremely warm period, right? And if we think about what's happening in our climate, right, we have basically 90% of the excess warming coming from human-derived global warming being absorbed by oceans. And so that's a lot of heat that the oceans are now trying to deal with. And so that comes out in different ways. One of the ways it comes out is extreme thermal events, right? And so these marine heat waves that we're seeing off the coast of Florida and in the Gulf of Mexico are a product of this excess heating. And so right now, I think NOAA, which is the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, puts the world's oceans at like 40% marine heat wave. Right, so this is an extremely high value. Typically, we see something like 5 to 10% this time of year. And so we are way above normal this year in terms of where the oceans are in terms of global heating.
Before we came on air, we were talking about coral reefs. Now, according to NOAA, coral reefs typically thrive at water temperatures between 73 and 84 degrees. Well, coral bleaching has already been reported this year in South Florida. Explain what that is and how that could present big problems for our ecosystem.
Yeah, so this is definitely an issue. And this is one of the first signs that excess heating is causing problems in ecosystems, right? What coral bleaching is, it's basically the coral has a symbiotic relationship with chlorophyll, and when it gets stressed, it boots that chlorophyll out of its system, and so it no longer has a way to make one way to make food, and so it's at a disadvantage. And so that coral bleaching process is usually viewed as a negative thing, and it usually causes corals to die. And so because coral reefs are such an important aspect of many ecosystems in terms of biodiversity, in terms of the pharmaceutical products that we can derive from the marine system, we're very concerned about how this excess heating, these marine heat waves, are impacting those environments.
Yeah, I read that about 90% of the drugs, available drugs, prescriptions we use are marine origin, and they come from coral reef ecosystems. So at what point do the problems begin? Meaning, at what temperature and for how long?
Yeah, and so this is a great question. This is one of these things that's going to depend on different species and different fish types. Different critters have different thresholds for when they're going to get stressed and have a negative response to heat. And so the longer and the hotter it is, the more extreme the stress is going to be on these different creatures, right? We're human beings. We can go into air condition. We can move to a different place.
Right.
Critters in the ocean are sort of stuck where they are, more or less, specifically, especially if you're a crab or something that's attached to the bottom. You really have nowhere to go, and so you're just stuck having to deal with this heat. And so that can be stressful, and depending on what species we're talking about, it may have different stress levels where you get a negative response from this heat.
So looking at the current pattern, where do you see things going from here?
Yeah, so I think as the weather reports have been predicting, right, it's going to stay hot in this area. And so this is probably just going to mean things are going to continue to warm up. And it's hard to say when that heat is going to break, but the ocean temperatures are closely coupled to the atmosphere. And so when we get a break in the atmospheric heat, we'll probably get a break in the ocean temperature heat.
Okay. All right. A lot to take in at one time. Thank you so much for being here, and we appreciate you sharing your research with us. And thank you for being here with us too. Next on